Good morning. Welcome to meeting 5 of the Interim Committee meeting on Economic Development and Workforce Investment. Thank you for coming here today. We have a pretty full agenda, including some interesting topics such as workforce development and cryptocurrency. So without ado, we will begin. If I could entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll move. Second.
All right. Hearing no opposition, the minutes from the last meeting are approved. Okay, first. Oh, sorry. I guess we need to probably call the roll to make sure we have a quorum, so I apologize.
Senator Gardler, Senator Carr, Senator McDaniel, Senator Mills,
Here in person.
Senator Southworth, Senator Storm.
Present my district.
Thank you. Senator Thomas, Senator Wheeler,
Present in the room.
Senator Wilson, Senator
Here
Yates.
in my district.
Thank you. Senator Yates.
Present by a district.
Thank you. Representative Baker.
In person.
Representative Banta.
Here in person.
Representative Beckler.
Present in the district.
Thank you. Representative Bojanowski.
Present in District 32.
Thank you. Representative Bray.
Present in my district.
Thank you. Representative Brown. Representative Callaway.
Here in person.
Representative Cantrell. Representative Elliott. Representative Freeland.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Gentry.
Here in my district.
Thank you. Representative Hart.
Here in the room.
Representative Huff.
Present in the room.
Representative Johnson.
Present in the room.
Representative King.
Present in the room.
Representative Colcarney. Representative Lawrence.
Present remotely within my district.
Thank you. Representative Lockett.
Here in the room.
Representative Rowland. Representative Sharp.
Present in the room.
Representative Sheldon.
Present my district.
Thank you. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Present remotely from the 95th District.
Thank you. Co-Chair Schroeder.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Co-Chair Weber.
Madam Secretary, do we have a quorum? All right. So now that we have officially counted a quorum, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, the minutes from last meeting are approved. Okay, first on the agenda, we have members of the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. My understanding is that they are appearing virtually. Is that correct?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's a shame you're not here with us in person, but all the same, we're interested to hear what you have to say. If you want to proceed, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, Chairman and other members of the committee. My name is Heather Deering, and I am the Deputy Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Coleman. Thank you so much for having us this morning. I am joined today by Deputy Secretary Mary Pat Regan and Commissioner of the Department for Workforce Investment, Marty Hammonds. And as I said, we're very excited to be here with you to talk about the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet, and in particular, our efforts in the area of workforce development. Next slide, please. Through the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet, we are providing Kentuckians from all across the Commonwealth the opportunity of transformational change to get a great education and a quality training so they can attain a meaningful career, support families, and break the cycle of poverty and prosper. Providing the opportunity for transformational change is the mission of our cabinet. For the past 2 years, we've worked hard to transform the cabinet into a cradle-to-career entity, starting with our Office of Early Childhood, carrying on through workforce development, our workforce innovation boards, proprietary education schools, and of course, our lifelong programs like the Department for Libraries and Archives and the Kentucky Educational Television. We've been doing this by focusing on the 4 E's of education and workforce development, so that we can ensure Kentuckians have a greater chance of success to enter the workforce in a strong position, and our industries can retain our best and brightest. First, we're expanding opportunities for early childhood education. Second, we're providing exposure to middle school students for career opportunities in their own communities. And third, we help high school students gain experience in real-world workforce training opportunities. And finally, following post-secondary education or training, we are helping Kentuckians gain expertise in their chosen field. As you know, this administration is focused on diversifying the workforce landscape, and even through the pandemic has ensured continuous growth for the Commonwealth's economy. In fact, this growth will be transformational for years to come. We've secured the single largest economic development project in Kentucky's history with the recent Ford announcement, and there's been thousands of new jobs announced in the past few years with billions of dollars of investments. And as more Kentuckians are vaccinated, and as American Rescue Plan Act spending supports our economy, people are returning to work in greater numbers, and Kentucky's economy is beginning to improve. While we recognize this job creation that the Commonwealth has seen, we also acknowledge that Kentucky's workforce has many challenges like these on the screen here that our cabinet must address as we look to the jobs of today and tomorrow. We know that next on the agenda is our partners from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, who will be providing you with a more in-depth look at these challenges. So I'm going to leave that to them. But I do want to point out that none of these challenges were caused by the pandemic. They all existed before. They were only further exacerbated by the effects of the pandemic. Regardless of their cause, we are committed to creating services and programs that address these challenges, as we will discuss throughout the remaining parts of this presentation. So to talk about the way the cabinet is tackling these challenges, I'd like to hand it off to Mary Pat Regan, our Deputy Secretary.
Great, thanks, Heather, and thank you, Chairman and Committee, for having us today. As Heather said, we understand the challenges in the workforce, and I think that the Chamber will be addressing those more in general, but I want to talk about what we're doing to address those challenges. And as we went through the pandemic last year and continue, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't recognize that broadband is a necessity. This is a critical priority for the administration, and we've taken proactive steps to address the broadband as we move forward. So the American Rescue Plan, the governor invested $300 million to expand broadband to make it access affordable and reliable. And any of you have been in the different areas of Kentucky, the current FCC maps that map out today where internet and service is not really the reality that we feel on the ground. So the governor commissioned a committee that was ad hoc and volunteer to take a look at crowdsourcing and doing our own mapping by using the internet speed test to identify unserved and underserved areas. And that map we have completed. And so as the first 50 million grant opportunity proposals that are due on October 25th, we can then move to identify and deploy in the unserved and underserved areas. And this is foundational to both education, economic development, and healthcare as we move forward. Next slide. Great, and I'll be handing this off to Commissioner Hammonds.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be brief. I know you have a busy schedule today. I just want to talk about a few programs that are focused on employers hiring disadvantaged people. The first one I want to talk about is the Workforce or Work Opportunity Tax Credit Certification, better known as WOTC. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit is a federal program administered by each state, awarded to companies that hire individuals who are consistently faced with significant barriers, such as ex-felons, government assistance, veterans, and long-term unemployed. Employers may receive WOTC credits up to between $1,200 and $9,600, depending on the target groups. Our Office of Employee Apprenticeship Services does all the work for the employer. They certify the employer to claim the credit with the IRS. The turnaround is about 1 day. Employees must be on the job for 28 days and work a minimum of 140 hours to receive the tax credit. The Kentucky Transformation Employment Program, KTEP, as it's known, is a new initiative to help Kentucky employers find and retain the workforce they need to support and grow their business while giving more Kentuckians the opportunity to access treatment and achieve remission and recovery from substance abuse disorders. The program provides a framework for employers to facilitate access to treatment current employees or candidates, and also encourage business to hire individuals impacted by substance abuse. An initiative that has been around for some time, but a lot of employers have not known, and we're truly marketing this the best way we can, is the federal bonding program. It lessens the employer's risk of hiring hard to place job seekers by providing a fidelity bond, a limited liability insurance policy at no cost to the employer, issued from $5,000 to $25,000 coverage for 6 months. The bond insures employers against theft, forgery, larceny, or embezzlement by the bonded employee. The bond does not cover liability due to poor workmanship or job injuries or work accidents. But what is the benefit of the fidelity bond? It gives employer peace of mind to hire at-risk job applicants. It protects the employer against fraud and dishonesty, and covers any type of stealing, larceny, embezzlement, forgery, and theft. Many private bonding companies will not bond job applicants who are qualified but at risk, meaning the job seeker will not get hired. The federal bonding program eliminates the barrier to employment for people who are trying to make a fresh start in their lives. The success of this program nationwide has helped more than 40,000 individuals across the nation with only a 1% default rate. The benefits of the bond: it's free to job applicant and employer. There's no deductible. It's available for any job, any employer, in any state and any industry. There's no paperwork for the employer or the employee. OES, the Office of Employee Apprenticeship Services, does all the work for the employer and the employee, and it saves millions of dollars of tax money by getting justice-involved people employed. Mary Pat?
Great, next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is me again. So a couple months ago, Secretary Jim Gray, Transportation Cabinet Secretary, and the Commissioner of Aviation met with us to discuss the need for pilots and aviation mechanics in the state of Kentucky. So we have scheduled a workforce discussion with the industry statewide on November 4th to discuss the needs, the demand for pilots and aviation mechanics and other demands in the aerospace and aviation industry moving forward. So that is November 4th, 2021, 2 p.m. to 3:30. So anyone that would be interested in joining that conversation, we certainly can extend that information to you. Secondly, information technology, Code Kentucky, and Commonwealth Coders. We have seen a demand for individuals entering the software and programming website development. Code Kentucky is an expansion of Code Louisville. We saw the success. We've seen over 800 individuals graduate from Code Louisville with 650 landing positions. And I believe it's like 230 companies that have hired those. So we thought that if the success in Louisville is has performed as it is, that we would expand throughout the state. So we thought we'd do a pilot project with Northern Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky. And the numbers are off the chart. I just want to share with you real quick. There's from early July to today, 630 total people have expressed interest in the website sign-up form for Code Kentucky. 153 people have gone on to complete the full application and begin the pre-work assessment for that. Commonwealth Coders is a 16-week program. It's more intense. It's 8 to 3:30, whereas Code Kentucky is 6 to 8 each night for 12 weeks. Commonwealth Coders focuses more on web development, whereas Code Kentucky focuses on web development, but also software development and programming. So we're seeing great success in this, and we know that IT is a job of the future. So,
great. Next slide. So as Heather mentioned, we in the cabinet are looking at things from cradle to career, and so we have a new program for a registered apprenticeship as a workforce solution that has traditionally been reserved for industrial careers in a male-dominated field, but we've introduced a new apprenticeship sector in the field of early childhood development. And this innovative approach offers opportunity to individuals in the field who may have been overlooked in the past. And it recognizes not only the value of post-secondary education, but it also elevates the workplace where earn as you learn model is implemented. So we're very excited about this. And the program will funnel new workers into the early care and education industry, but also open up additional classrooms for families in need of quality childcare programs to return to work. Next slide. Marty?
Yes, ma'am. So the cabinet continues to invest in programs for critical jobs of tomorrow. The Line Tech program is an initiative that was brought to us between Jefferson Community College and LG&E. We have learned over the last couple of months that there is a high demand for line technicians. So when it was brought to us, the focus was, one, we need more line technicians, but also we need to diversify the individuals in the Line Tech program. It's an 8 to 10 week program. There are training facilities in Jefferson County, Hazard, and Madisonville. Not only does the program focus on line technician, but it also provides these individuals with CDL licenses. The cost for the tuition is about $8,000, which limits a lot of individuals to be able to participate. So our focus is trying to find funding and provide funding for those individuals to be able to participate. Industry reps say it takes about 5 years to get the experience that they need to be a top-notch Class A level tech. But the jobs start out somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000, and according to the industry, after 5 to 6 years and willingness to work and deal with disaster recovery, these individuals can make up to 6 digits.
Great, next slide. These are additional programs that we are also working on today. As I think many of you are aware, we have a shortage of bus drivers and drivers. This is why we see the supply chain interrupted. So we're working with KCTCS in their facilities. We are also working with the proprietary schools across the Commonwealth. And we have, as of yesterday, entered into an agreement with KDE to offer that local school districts can use these proprietary schools to train their bus drivers, get their CDL license. This isn't a mandatory initiative, but just that these schools are available to train new bus drivers for their CDL license. And then we've also introduced a registered apprenticeship website, and this will have an ease of access and support for employers for recruitment, retention, and workforce initiative. And another area that we are partnering with other cabinets is fair chance hiring. So we allow Kentuckians who are coming out of prison, or if they're coming out of addiction and treatment centers, working with them to provide services to get them back into the workforce. Next slide. And as we move across the spectrum, we are also working with adult education. We've had 23,000 individuals since 2020 enroll in the adult education and Kentucky Skills U. We've had 4,600 individuals who have taken the GED exam, and 79% have earned their GED. So we continue to move that needle and continue to work with those adults. And I want to extend a special thank you to the legislature for working with us to partnership with Goodwill, who will be providing Kentuckians 18 years or older to go to high school in the Excel Center in Louisville. Currently, this model is offered in Indiana, and it is very successful. So they are going to be launching in the spring, and very excited and grateful to the legislature for working with us to provide this with Goodwill. I think it will have a huge impact on those adults coming back into the workforce. And I also want to highlight the Governor's School of Entrepreneurs. I think this has been a fantastic program. We've had 600 alums who have started 20 businesses, and they filed for multiple patents across the state. And then we were worked with KDE this summer. This was an initiative from the Lieutenant Governor to offer 3,000 individuals across the state, K through 12, to do a summer enrichment program. The Lieutenant Governor and we felt that kids really needed, after being inside of the pandemic, during the pandemic, to get out into our state parks and have a day of learning, to come back into school this fall. So that was very successful, and we're looking to extend that into a permanent summer program. Next slide. And these are the areas in which we see significant growth with the announcements of economic development that the governor has brought in, and with the education that we need to put into place. These are really the expanding markets. It's a very exciting time to be in this arena. We've got agri-tech coming in, we've got advanced manufacturing, we've got paper recycling and sustainability in the West. Healthcare, we continue to partner and work with addressing those shortages as they are today, so that we're prepared as we go forward. And then cybersecurity, we have been working in Northern Kentucky with some companies out of Florida who are hiring our trained individuals in Northern Kentucky, where they can work from home and still be part of cybersecurity. So that is also a very growing industry. And then our telework program, which we've had, but we've expanded throughout the state. We are working with employers like Hilton, with Marriott, with Nordstrom's, and these telework positions offer good paying jobs while keeping people here in Kentucky. So again, we are excited, grateful. We are going to keep moving forward. And I would thank you for the opportunity for us to present to you today, and open it up for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've got two questions, if I might.
Certainly, sir.
First one I think is for Commissioner Hammonds and the aviation workforce meeting on November 4th.
Yes.
Any way that you can get that information out to us? Because I'd be very interested in
Absolutely, sir. I'd be more than glad to get that to you.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned that veterans are part of the program that you've got as far as I don't know exactly what the term is, but you're working with veterans to involve them in workforce development. Can you expand on that? What's going on with the veterans? Because they tend to be included into these programs, but they're really a separate category. So I'm kind of concerned that they are on paper in the program, but I'm not sure what's happening to make sure that they're included. Can you give me any more information on that?
Sure, Representative. And what I was referencing was the work opportunity tax credit. And there is a tax credit for employers that hire veterans that have been unemployed for 4 weeks up to $2,400. Then disabled veterans that have been unemployed up for 6 months, that tax credit could be up $9,600. There is a program specifically for veterans. It's actually under the Labor Cabinet now. It's under Career Development Office. And I don't want to answer for them, but I can certainly put you in touch with the individual that runs that program and get you the information you need. Absolutely will.
And then one final quick question, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The Excel Center. I haven't heard of this before. Can you tell me what the Excel Center is about? Somebody, I don't know if you're the right guy or not, but.
Representative,
Sure,
I'm not the right guy. Mary Pat, I'll turn that to you.
Okay, sure. This is a partnership with Goodwill that will, it's a standalone facility up in Louisville that will offer GED education for Kentuckians 18 or older who haven't have their high school diploma. It will offer childcare, legal help. It's an entire center for adults so they can be trained, get their GED, and go back into the workforce.
And so these are for citizens from all across the state of Kentucky, or is it a Louisville-centric program, or what's the scope?
It is for individuals in Louisville. There's no restriction for anybody else coming in, but they've done this in Indiana, and so this is going to open in Louisville, but we hope to expand it across the state.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, we have Representative Banta.
Yes, I just want to thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. I'm going to be jumping all over the place because I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
First of all, do we have any data for the number of successes of the students that have gone through GSP or GSA in terms of college completion once they get that, and then job procurement afterwards? Any data on that?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it for you.
I would appreciate that. I'd like to
Mhm.
see some numbers on that. That'd be great.
Yep. Okay.
And when you mentioned early childhood, you said that the training, you said that you were working with the overlooked section of the population. What is an overlooked section of the population? Who is that?
We want to ensure that early childhood has a pipeline of individuals. We don't have that today, and so what we're looking at is individuals who maybe need the wraparound services to come back for that kind of training. That's kind of what I'm referring to as helping those individuals get back into the early childhood workforce.
Maybe I jump in here to Representative Banta. I think in the context too of developing apprenticeship programs are largely housed in the advanced manufacturing and construction sectors of workforce development. So for us to have an apprenticeship program for early childhood education, we're really kind of tapping into a different market of potential apprenticeships.
Okay, so not necessarily overlooked people, but just a different category.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just
Maybe
reaching out to a new population of those who would be interested in apprenticeships in a sector that isn't traditionally represented by that program.
Thank you. Chairman, may I have one more?
We have one person waiting, but if you make it quick.
Okay. How is the summer enrichment children chosen, the 3,000? Because I know in my county, I would probably have had 3,000 alone. So I was just curious how the lieutenant governor.
Well, they weren't chosen. We worked with the individual school district to identify those who were interested in going this summer. It was a pilot program to see how we could get people who as everyone knows, the camps were entirely full last summer. So we wanted to develop a program that students with out normal access who maybe normally don't go to camp had an opportunity. So we work with the school district in developing just the interest, and then work with them on getting those kids into the program.
All school
so
districts?
we would like to expand it, and I think they're based on our results from last year, bringing in the science center to do some classes out in these state parks was very helpful. So we hope to expand it moving forward.
Thank you.
And we have Representative Lawrence online.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to just say thank you guys for your presentation today. There was a multitude of things covered, a couple of which I'm very passionate about. I heard you mention proprietary schools and trades, and really working with some of the colleges and the KCTCS, and trying to work with folks to get some of these skilled workers out and provide them opportunities. So I just want to commend you and thank you for the work that you're doing. And I look forward to working with you guys to make sure that we open up every opportunity that we can to train the next workforce for Kentucky. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
I have
you.
one final question, Senator Mitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. Deering. This is my third day of committee meetings this week, and so far we have not seen anybody from the administration here in person. Is there a policy right now in place that administration only reports to the legislature via Zoom, and if there is, when can we expect that to change. Our other two presenters that are here are in person. We've had rooms full of people reporting to us, and I'd like to see, as much as I like the report that was given to us via Zoom, I understand the information better when it's presented in person and we can ask questions. So just a question, since you're Deputy Chief of Staff, probably close to those discussions. Could you fill us in on that a little bit?
Well, I would love to fill you in on that, but I'm fairly new to my role. I personally am not in person because I'm on my way to Bowling Green today, and I apologize I couldn't be there in person. As far as a policy, I believe we're just waiting for it to be the safest possible. But I'd be happy to get back to you with more information on a time frame for when we can start getting back in person.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. Next up, we have representatives from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. If you'd like to come and take a seat, and I think one of you, Ms. Miller, is online. Is that correct? All right.
That is correct.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Give me 1 second while I try to share screen here. I think I need to move this out of the way. Can you put it into presentation mode? While we're working this out, I'll go ahead and jump into things. First of all, I do want to thank this committee very much for having the chamber back to talk about this issue. And I particularly want to thank you all for the amount of time you've spent on the workforce challenges that have really shaped not only Kentucky's economic recovery, but the nation's economic recovery for that matter. We do appreciate you all spending so much bandwidth on this. We know that you have a lot of issues before you, but this is an absolutely critical issue that certainly merits attention. So we appreciate you spending all this time on it. Thank you, Andrew. So I had an opportunity, along with our president and CEO, Ashley Watts, to talk with you all a few months ago about this new report that the Kentucky Chamber was producing. At the time that I talked with you all about that, we were still in the production process. We were kind of finalizing some of our data and putting that out. That report is officially live. It's out there in the world now. You can access it on kychamber.com. We have printed copies that are on their way. And so those will be certainly in front of you all as soon as we have them. I will say, ever since we produced this report, it has not gone unnoticed. We've been doing dozens of interviews in places all throughout the state. This is just a sampling of some of the media coverage that we've gotten on this report. And I share this with you just to illustrate the point. People are talking about this, and that's one of the exact reasons we wanted to share this report. We wanted people having lively conversations on Kentucky's workforce challenges. And you can see outlets all across Kentucky are focusing in on this issue and exploring it. And in fact, I know I've talked to some legislators, their constituents are talking to them about it. I was even at a public event a few weeks ago where we were talking about a different topic, and someone actually brought up the issue of workforce and started quoting this report directly to me, which was delightful to hear because they were words that we wrote, but it's just good to kind of hear that out in the world. What I want to do here today is, last time we talked, I focused more on the problems that Kentucky's facing when it comes to workforce challenges. I'm going to move over those fairly quickly. And instead, I want to talk with you all about what we see as some of the major causes of Kentucky's workforce challenges, but then also some really specific legislative actions that you all can take in 2022 even to begin addressing some of these big issues. And that's going to take a really multifaceted approach. But we have some specifics and some real legislative work that can be done. I want to back up for a minute and talk about why did we do this report in the first place. The Kentucky Chamber has produced a lot of reports on workforce challenges over the past decade or so. We found, though, that there was a need to really increase the urgency around this issue. This is one of the primary things we hear about when we talk to our members. And when I talk to any business throughout the state, I always ask them, how's business going? Then I ask them, how's staffing going? It's the same answer every single time. They're all struggling with staffing. It's a very, very consistent thing. So we determined we really needed to create an increased sense of urgency around addressing this problem. The other reason that we wanted to do another report is because we wanted to reframe this conversation. Another thing, when you're talking to folks about workforce challenges, we tend to get focused on really specific causes. Is it wages? Is it our unemployment insurance structure? And people just tend to kind of fixate on those one things at a time. One of the things we wanted to highlight with this issue is the causes are extremely multifaceted and often interconnected. And so the solutions need to approach that from that exact same perspective, a large approach that includes a whole bunch of different ways of addressing the issue. So what we do in this report, we take a data-driven historical analysis of Kentucky's workforce challenges. We went through roughly 2 decades of labor force data and labor market data to kind of highlight some of these points. We talk about root causes, and then we talk about specific state policy solutions. The problem that we are highlighting in this report, I think, can be well illustrated by this chart that's right in front of you, which shows the workforce participation rates for the United States and for Kentucky over the past roughly 21 years. That red line is the United States labor force participation rate or workforce participation rate. And again, this is the combination of employed and unemployed individuals as a percentage of the adult civilian non-institutionalized population. That red line, U.S. workforce participation rate, you can see a steady decline downwards. Blue line, Kentucky, you see that exact same trend line. But a couple of things worth pointing out. First, if you look at the sort of bottom right-hand part of that graph, you see that cliff. That's COVID hitting. In the context of Kentucky, we saw about 112,000 individuals exit the workforce within the span of roughly 3 to 4 months. You don't see a drop like that. You do see another drop looking roughly, 2011, 2012 down to 2015. That was the previous financial crisis. A little bit of a delayed reaction in terms of folks leaving the workforce. But what we saw last year was really unprecedented. But I think the more unnerving thing, in addition to that drop, is the recovery of individuals re-entering the workforce, which you can see on this chart. We're nowhere near back to where we were. We're still about 90,000 workers short of where we were before the pandemic started. But the big thing I want to call your attention to with this chart is the downward trend is troubling. This is a national trend. Kentucky is following that national trend. This goes back all the way to 2000. But that gap between the national workforce participation rate and Kentucky's workforce participation rate is the thing that really catches our attention. This is something that makes Kentucky very unique. And to look further into that, we compare ourselves to other states, and this is something that I think most folks in this committee are perfectly well aware of. Compare Kentucky to other states. We're lower with the exception of West Virginia. We zoom out even further to look at the entire United States. Kentucky ranks about 48th for its workforce participation rate throughout the entire nation. And that's not really unique in Kentucky's history. That's been a fairly consistent problem. The big takeaways in terms of talking about the challenges in this report, the workforce challenges, can be illustrated here with these takeaways. The percentage of Kentucky adults who participate in the workforce has been in a state of decline for 2 decades. And this is part of a national trend, but it's worse here in Kentucky, and it's worse here than almost anywhere else in the nation. And this framework is what we're presenting to you all as legislators for thinking through a lot of these workforce issues. So if you go back and kind of think about, whatever sort of top challenge comes to your mind or top cause of this, you really got to think about a chart like this that shows a very large national trend line. And that's where we have to start thinking about these multifaceted causes. So let's talk briefly about some of these causes. What are some of the things that are driving Kentucky's low rates of workforce participation, as well as the United States' low rates of workforce participation? This first chart, we get into retirements. This is something you cannot avoid talking about with low workforce participation, and this is one of your major drivers for that larger decline across the entire nation. So what this chart shows is the annual increase in retired the U.S. baby boomer population in terms of how many of these folks are retiring every year. From about 2012 to 2019, we saw roughly 2 million baby boomers retire as they kind of enter into that age bracket where they're likely to retire. In 2020, we saw a really large spike in this, surpassed 3 million. A very, very large jump in the amount of baby boomers that are retiring. That's not really something that was expected prior to COVID, but a lot of folks saw this as an opportune time to get out. If you're an older person working at this time, there's safety reasons for doing that, but the stock market also did really, really well the past several years. And so financially, it was a pretty good time to retire, actually. So we saw this really large bump, but it's important not to lose track of the fact that we've seen about 2 million of these folks leave the workforce over the past 20 years. Skills gaps is another really important issue for us to talk about and understand how that intersects with workforce participation, because it's not one of those things that immediately clicks in your mind. When we talk about skills gaps, we're talking about the gaps between the skills that an employee has, so the experience, the background, the training that they have, versus what an employer actually needs. Back in 2016, the White House Council for Economic Advisors published a really interesting report getting into this issue, and one of the things they concluded was that we had a lot of folks in this country that had a skill set for a long time. Suddenly that skill set is no longer of use, or maybe they just don't have the skills exactly that employers are looking for. And instead of upskilling or training or finding those opportunities to train, a lot of these folks tend to just give up out of frustration and unable to find a job that fits their skills, and they become discouraged workers and they just leave the workforce altogether. And we saw a very, very large amount of that happening over the past 10 years or so, particularly ever since the fiscal crisis back in 2008, 2009. What this chart here shows us, when we talk about skills gaps, one of the easiest ways to think about it is how many folks have some sort of post-secondary attainment. So that might be a credential, it might be a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, but something after high school is what we're looking for. This compares Kentucky to the nation, and you can see we're not too terribly far behind, and we're making progress in this regard. We're seeing an increase in the folks that are getting some level of post-secondary attainment. To put this in context, though, somewhere between 60 to 75% of jobs out there are going to require some form of post-secondary attainment. And that's probably a really low estimate, to be honest with you. 60 to 75%. It's probably higher than that, depending on where you are geographically. And if we're hovering around less than 50%, that's a big problem. So we do need to think about ways that we can increase post-secondary attainment in Kentucky to make sure we're at least keeping pace with the nation. But again, ideally, we'd want to be ahead of national averages. We spent some time talking about a lot of other root causes as well. Retirements, skills gaps, those are big macro issues. Some of the other issues that are contributing, particularly to Kentucky, we talked about lack of access to childcare. The cabinet was mentioning this a few minutes ago. This is a really big issue. Another chart we could talk about is the decline of female workforce participation that took place during COVID. It's real interesting if you look at the history. Female workforce participation and male workforce participation. Female workforce participation has been rising for many, many years. Male workforce participation has been a steady state of decline ever since the end of World War II. That trend really took a big hit under COVID, and we would argue childcare is closely connected to that, and the lack of access to childcare that's been highlighted during COVID as we saw multiple providers and centers close. Health and substance disorder issues, as many of you are well aware, Kentucky struggles significantly when it comes to various health metrics. We have some disturbing new data on the rise of substance use disorder that took place in 2020, but these are long-term systemic issues in Kentucky. And the University of Kentucky has done some great work illustrating the connections between health issues, substance use disorder, and workforce participation. By UK's estimates, upwards of 50,000 workers may have been displaced or removed out of the workforce specifically due to the opioid epidemic, which is an absolutely staggering number. That's a well over a percentage point of our workforce participation rate right there, just with the opioid epidemic. We talk about incarceration, reentry, the impact of criminal records, and how that can impact an individual's ability to participate in the workforce. We talk about social safety net programs and benefit cliffs, particularly with unemployment insurance, as well as other programs such as the Child Care Assistance Program. We'll talk more about UI in a minute. But then, of course, the other big issue that you have to think about is population growth. Kentucky grew at a much slower rate than the rest of the nation over the past decade. And we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Plenty of other states grew much more quickly. Tennessee grew more quickly. Indiana had better growth than we did. And when you contextualize population growth in the context of all these retirements that we've seen, really, we need to find more people to move to Kentucky and get them here and get them working. That's going to be a key part. So I'm going to talk about some of our recommended policy solutions. And after that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Lakeisha Miller, who can talk about some of the things the private sector is already doing, because I think it's important to kind of see how these things work together. First thing I want to mention, and I'll storm through these fairly quickly, we need to do a better job of tracking and evaluating workforce programming and spending. Back in 2015, the Cabinet for Economic Development did a study of how much money are we spending on workforce development in Kentucky? And they didn't look at things such as K-12 education. They looked at more specific workforce development program. They found about $1.2 billion that we were spending on workforce development activities. That includes some federal dollars as well. But they also created an asset map. Here's where all that money is going. That's something we need to start doing on a more routine basis, because that can set us up to start studying these programs and looking at them in terms of what is the ROI. For any of you that have looked at the Kentucky Workforce Investment Board's strategic plan, if you haven't read that report, I highly recommend it. It's a good report. This is their fourth strategic goal, and it's an important one, and it's something that I think the General Assembly can play a role in, but this could help us a lot. Going back to those post-secondary attainment rates that I talked about a few minutes ago, one thing we could do is make the FAFSA a high school graduation requirement. So completing FAFSA, a high school graduation requirement. We, as a state, leave about $30 million in Pell Grant dollars on the table every year. That's money that students could be using to go to college, to get some sort of certification or whatever it might be. And that's one of the ways that we can increase post-secondary attainment. Barriers to education and employment for individuals with criminal records. I'm going to talk about two things here. For the past 2 years, the House has worked on a really great bill that would remove a statutory prohibition on individuals with criminal records from accessing KEYS dollars. It's a good bill. It's passed out of the House by large margins, past 2 years in a row. That's another one of those things where we can very easily, I think, remove a barrier that individuals face post-incarceration in terms of getting an education. So I'd really like to see that work its way through the General Assembly in 2022. That's a good bill. It's kind of low-hanging fruit that I think we can knock out. We also do need to think more about our expungement system. We have a pretty robust expungement system in Kentucky that enables folks to have felony or misdemeanor records removed, and this can help them get into employment. There's a lot of restrictions around that, a lot of requirements that people have to follow, but one of the things we might think about is there's a 5-year waiting period before you are eligible to have a felony record expunged. The 5-year waiting period, just to be frank, is relatively arbitrary. There's nothing magical about that 5 years. We could whittle that down to 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. We could have a large conversation around that, but that would increase the speed with which someone is able to get a record expunged, and in turn help them get into work faster. Going back to population growth, if you take a look at states that grew quickly in this past census, one of the things they tended to have in common is very attractive tax codes. Kentucky's made some good progress when it comes to tax reform, 2018, 2019. That was good stuff, good reforms. We need to build on that, and that's something the Chamber is going to be working very hard on in 2022. But we need to have a tax code that encourages people to come work here. If you think about states with lower income taxes, if you're taking a job that pays the same salary in Tennessee versus it does here, well, you come to Kentucky, you're technically getting up to 5 to 7% pay cut because of that income tax structure. And I say 5 to 7% because we also have that local side. Kentucky's UI system is something that we think could use some significant improvements, and specifically what we've been thinking about with the UI system is how can we have a more effective work search program. My colleague, Kate Shanks, she'll be talking with the UI Reform Task Force next week about this in more detail. But we have a lot of room for improvement when it comes to the nature of our work search system. I was actually at an unemployment insurance conference yesterday. That is a thing. Those exist. And one of the things we talked about that was the different ways that states structure their work search programs. And Kentucky's is very, very weak and does not offer a high level of support for individuals on unemployment and getting them back into work faster. And so we have a lot of things we could do to improve our work search program. Two more things I want to mention is expanding and improving our child care assistance program. This is a very important subsidy program for working parents to afford child care. We've done some good improvements on this in the past couple of years, but we could do more, such as increasing provider reimbursements rates through CCAPs, but also expanding eligibility, making more people eligible for this program. It's going to cost some money, but it's a well worthwhile program and something that, again, we could do this in 2022. And finally, I want to mention reducing smoking rates. This is something the Chamber has been talking about for several years now. But going back to some of those health issues that I mentioned a minute ago, a lot of this stuff can be traced back to very, very high levels of smoking in Kentucky. And we know there are some good tools out there that we can use to reduce smoking, such as removing smokers as a protected class, raising the cigarette tax, which is, again, it's usually a strong incentive to not smoke. Those are effective things, and this has an impact on our workforce participation. So it's something that we think is well worth pursuing. With that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Lakeisha Miller, to talk a little bit about what's going on in the private sector and how we're addressing some of these issues.
Actually, before we move on to part two, I guess, since it's a fairly lengthy presentation, I'm going to go ahead and maybe ask a few questions about what you just went over, and I'll go ahead and start with something that I've observed from reading your report. One thing I guess that concerned me, many of these issues, at least maybe not the Kentucky Chamber, but the National Chamber has, in my opinion, contributed to by pushing a lot of outsourcing of many of these jobs and skill sets that you say are no longer useful. They're useful, but they're now in places like China and Mexico and many other countries that is a direct result of a lot of lobbying by the National Chamber and other organizations to remove some of these barriers that have essentially led to the deindustrialization of America in a lot of ways. And I think we're seeing that now, how really weak and vulnerable our country has been made by the current supply chain shortage that we're seeing at the port areas. And, I see nothing in your plan to combat some of that. It seems like, if anything, we're just trying to expand a lot of service industries, clean up a lot of the problems that the deindustrialization has created, in the sense that many people who previously had good jobs have been forced into poverty. They've been forced into households where both parents have to work. No social safety nets as far as employer pensions or things like that. Many of these things that you all are talking about seems like symptoms of a greater problem that in many ways the National Chamber has been complicit in, rather than solutions to the long-term goal of strengthening our manufacturing base at home. So I guess if you could maybe address some of those issues. I know I kind of tossed a lot at you, but what is the Kentucky's Chamber on the continued outsourcing? Do we need to put some protective trade barriers and other things that will protect American industries and allow some of these things to thrive here at home?
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Wheeler. Big issue, big question there. I guess I'll come kind of out of the gate pushing back a little bit. First of all, outsourcing is something that has happened. I think it's overstated, the extent of outsourcing, if you look at macroeconomic data, because it's been offset by a lot of insourcing, which has happened. Ultimately, what's happened over the past 20 to 30 years, our economy has changed. Free trade agreements have probably played a significant role in that, but so has automation and technology. A lot of that deindustrialization that we're seeing, regardless of whether or not free trade agreements were in place, which a lot of those free trade agreements do include a variety of different worker protections as part of those larger agreements. But automation and technology, I think, would have driven a lot of this deindustrialization that we're seeing in the first place. So I think it's important to kind of keep those two things in mind and not isolate free trade agreements.
I see a lot of these factories seem to be full of foreign workers over there producing the things that we used to produce here. So automation is the only thing that we have to, that seems like that's an easy answer, but, I think that, show me the pictures, show me the money. It's clear that many of these businesses have chosen, foreign production facilities rather than utilizing our American workforce.
Well, and I think essentially what's happened here is, yes, we have seen a shift. We've seen a shift to a much stronger service sector economy. That has happened. And in terms of what is the Kentucky Chamber's plan to deal with that, I would disagree that we don't have a plan on that. That's just one of the reasons why we're so insistent on post-secondary attainment, because our service sector very much requires high levels of post-secondary attainment. That's going to be a very, very important thing for us to do. So I would strongly emphasize that as a key to dealing with that issue. Part of the service sector economy, and service sector, thinking about that very, very broadly, service sector's economies just require higher levels of education, which in general also produce well-paying jobs. So that's, I think, another reason why we really have to go after increasing those levels of post-secondary attainment, because that's the type of workforce that we're trending towards. That we're not trending towards, we're already there. And so I think it's time that we just catch up. And so that's one of the reasons we stress that issue.
Fair enough. I guess we have some other questions. Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it took me a sec to click off. First of all, so thank you for the presentation, and it actually kind of tied in something that we were presented last week in the school funding task force. The OEM did a report on school funding, and it gave us some historical data on the number of individuals with disabilities. They segmented their data into quintiles based upon districts with the lowest property tax values. Property values. So in quintile 1, which is the set of districts with the lowest property value, the number of students with disabilities increased from 1991 to 2020 from 14.3% to 20.7%. And just kind of thinking then a few years later, all of these students with disabilities will graduate. And then here we are talking about why we are struggling with workforce development. And I think we need to take a look back into what's causing that. And you mentioned the impact of the opioid addiction. And I think, these are primarily rural districts. And I think that there's been a very strong impact there. So from your perspective, what is the impact of a significantly greater proportion of graduates who have disabilities? And then what are we doing to support individuals with disabilities so that they can participate in the workforce?
Yeah, that's a great question, Representative. I have not seen the OEM report. It's on my list of things to read. So I'd like to read that report and learn a little more about, for example, how we're defining disabilities and just understand that a little bit better before I comment directly on specific proposals to deal with that issue.
I would appreciate that. May I ask the chair, may I ask one more question, please?
We have a few others ahead of you, so if you can make it quick, please.
Okay, I will try. And I've talked to GLI about this a little bit. So what do you recommend to address the brain drain of young people who are not only leaving the state, but who are also leaving rural areas to go to the Golden Triangle? And just kind of tied into that, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the impact of legislation on racism, racial equity, those sort of things. GLI made a statement that they're against any curriculum that pose a threat to progress the region has made in advancing racial equity and attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. So they do not support a policy that restricts and or limits any school district's ability to control its own curriculum. We oppose current and future legislation that jeopardizes our work to promote inclusion and attract talent and business to our region. We're talking about how we can bring and keep a high quality workforce in our state. What is the impact of bills and publicity and just having legislation and having policies that are essentially not advancing racial equity?
Well, broadly speaking, we certainly do encourage the General Assembly to keep a close eye on legislation that is being considered or that is passed that could hinder someone's decision to work here, to move here, to stay here. Those things matter. We do need to pay really close attention to the type of legislation that we're working on and the message that sends more broadly. So that's a worthwhile conversation. That's something that we keep a really close eye on. Going back to the larger brain drain issue, why are people that graduate from UK or something like that and they leave to a different go to a different state? I'm going to give one broad answer to that, and I think this is one of the key reasons we need to think about tax reform in this state. I'd be interested to know what states are a lot of these folks that are graduating from our colleges, where are they going? One of the things we can do with that, one of the levers that we can pull, is to have a more attractive tax environment that would encourage them to want to stay here, that would be more enticing to them. And also with that, I think with a more attractive tax environment, we can attract even more opportunities here, which again would discourage somebody from leaving. So it's an important lever that the General Assembly can pull that I think can deal with issues such as the brain drain, but it can also deal with larger talent attraction and retention issues as well. And so that's one of the reasons why we think tax reform is such an important concept.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'd be interested in seeing the data on research on the impact of taxes on a young person's decision. Thank you very much.
Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Charles, for being with us again today. I certainly appreciated your presentation at the State Fair during August. That was insightful, so thank you for being here again today. I have two quick questions, if I may. On your workforce participation slide, I didn't see the impact of the federal bonus and that having expired. Do you see any, is that weighing in on this, or when should we be able to see the good aspects of that expiring?
Just to be clear, are you talking about the unemployment insurance?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
the
great.
Extra 300.
Great question. So that's an issue that has gotten a tremendous amount of conversation, and it's one of those issues that the public really wants to have a conversation about. Did UI benefits negatively impact employment, or did they not impact unemployment? And the unfortunate answer to that is we're going to have to wait for a while before we can really dive into that issue. The type of data that we're working with to measure these types of things is large macroeconomic data that is receiving thousands of different variables and inputs. And so when you try to isolate one specific policy change at a time and to try to read that into this data, it's not going to cooperate the way that you want it to. And so folks have tried to turn to other forms of data to make their case for either why they think those UI benefits or why they think they can prove these UI benefits had a negative or a positive impact. And so, for example, they turn to online search data. Indeed.com has been a really big source of research on this. Not everybody searches for jobs on Indeed.com. So it's not a definitive source, but some people have looked at the early exit states. So about 26 states ended unemployment earlier. The other states remained on that up through September 6th. And people try to draw conclusions on that. In terms of, data that we have where all 50 states have officially ended their participation in the expanded unemployment system, we only have about 1 month of data on that. We have September data. Bear in mind, while all that was happening, we also saw a rise in the Delta variant. So that's again going to cloud things up. I will say, from just a more, I think, in my opinion, common sense economic perspective, if you pay someone more than they would make to stay home, they'll probably stay home. So I think common sense would tell us that that program absolutely had a negative impact on overall employment. Whether or not we're going to see that in the data as clearly as we would like to see, that's harder to say. I will say the St. Louis Fed released a paper, I believe it was last week, maybe the week before. They were pointing to a little bit of evidence suggesting that those early 26 states that did leave early, that they did see a larger surge in employment than a lot of other states that did not. So there's kind of preliminary data backing around it there. But unfortunately, I imagine some economists will work on a complex paper within the next year or two where we can really dive into that a little more clearly.
I'm going to go ahead. I know we have a few more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and let Ms. Miller speak for a little bit, and then we'll try to fit some of these folks at the end since we still have one more presentation. Ms. Miller?
Yes, hi. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and good morning, Chairman and other members of this committee. Charles has said a lot today, and you guys have asked some really great questions regarding just this report and some of the statistics. And as Charles mentioned, what I'd love to do is just take the opportunity to discuss some of the programs that we've already started in the private sector through public-private partnerships through the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center. So the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center is a part of the Kentucky Chamber Foundation, which is our philanthropic arm of the Chamber. And we already have initiatives underway that develop, expand, and strengthen our workforce in ways businesses need to support Kentucky's economy. Charles did a fantastic job of highlighting a report from University of Kentucky that showed that the opioid epidemic was responsible for removing between 23 and 55,000 Kentuckians from the workforce. And additionally, the Office of Drug Control Policy data also tells us that the opioid epidemic is disproportionately impacting prime working age Kentuckians between the ages of 25 and 54. So we know that this epidemic continues to impact our state's ability to be competitive and retain talent. But what we do know is that employment enhances the ability for people to stay in recovery. So the Chamber Foundation, we've partnered with several state partners, namely Kentuckiana Health Collaborative, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, the Office of Drug Control Policy, and Kentucky Opioid Response Effort. And we launched the Kentucky Transformational Employment Program. And that grew out of Senate Bill 191. And just to go in a little bit of detail with this program, this initiative helps Kentucky employers to find and retain their workforce, but grow their businesses, while Kentuckians have the opportunity to access treatment and achieve remission from substance use. So really quick example. So if an employer hired or kept this individual on the payroll, and that individual followed the program requirements, the employer could receive liability protections for negligent hiring, supervision, or retention. So other states have seen success with similar programs like KTEP. So, the Chamber's role with this program is just to continue to actively promote KTEP in the business community and raise awareness throughout the state. And so far, we've launched this program. It's probably been about 3 weeks. And we have close to 13 employers already signed up, which that has impacted over 1,000 employees across the state. So we're really excited about this program, and we'll continue again to promote this across the state and get employer buy-in. Secondly, this was mentioned earlier, but in partnership with our Education and Workforce Cabinet, we've launched a workforce program called Talent Pipeline Management back in 2017. And that is specifically focused on addressing the skills gap that Charles was referring to earlier, but do it in an employer-driven way. So the key with TPM, TPM mobilizes the business community to help employers become more effective and efficient at determining their most critical workforce needs. They're also going to evaluate the skills that are needed for these positions, but most importantly, we have to get better at facilitating a process of communicating these needs so we can really improve the performance of the talent pipeline. And TPM helps employers to be able to do that in a really, really effective way. So the way that I look at it, TPM is critical because it can help pre-existing workforce development and education programs really hone in on what employers need. And we've actually seen that over the past few years across Kentucky. So we've been able to engage about 200 employers within various industries like manufacturing, construction, distilling, equine, and healthcare. And a lot of those employers have used TPM to see a return on investment on their pipeline, but start to develop more meaningful partnerships within their communities. So to date, we've seen about 2,000 Kentuckians connected to jobs and training opportunities as a result of TPM. One of the other things that we do, we also encourage the businesses that we work with to take advantage of, KCTCS trains funds or other programs like that program, which help to offset the cost of incumbent worker training, new hire training, pre-employment training by 75%. And we've really seen that companies that take advantage of these opportunities, it's proven to be a powerful retention strategy. So, any way we can encourage employers to save money as they implement these training opportunities, we certainly encourage. So all of the programs that I mentioned today and I've discussed, we're really focused on building Kentucky's workforce through business-led solutions. And that's really been effective at seeing the pipeline grow and create a true ROI for employers throughout the state. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to Charles again.
Well, thank you very much. And I do agree. I think the best way out of addiction is a job. I know one of the major employers in my district, Addiction Recovery Care, has a major focus on addiction to jobs type program and apprenticeships. And I think that the best way, the old saying that an idle mind's a devil's workshop, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of the problems that we are in rural areas. And to combat that, the best thing we could do is get these folks skills. I'm sorry, I had a natural tendency to look to my right, and I had a couple questions over on the left side, so I do apologize. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charles, you listed in the causes of the low workforce participation rate, some of those causes you listed were the skills gap, incarceration, and Lakeisha just mentioned the opioid epidemic. And to Senator Wheeler's point, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. What role do you see playing in this, the high level of welfare that we have within the state? And do you see different pockets in different areas that may have higher levels than others?
Yeah, it's undoubtedly an important driver of the issue. I think Dr. Paul Coombs talked with, I think it was maybe A&R a few months ago, that talked about how states rank in terms of income that comes from government transfer payments. So broadly speaking, various social subsidy programs. So Kentucky was 4th or 5th in the nation for government transfer payments. There's a lot of good work, particularly on Social Security disability insurance and its interconnections with low rates of workforce participation. So there is undoubtedly a clear connection between the way those programs are structured, not necessarily the programs themselves. Oftentimes those programs need to be there. There's a variety of reasons they exist in the first place, but it really comes down to the structure of those programs and how those things might disincentivize work. Great example of that, benefit cliffs. A whole lot of social welfare type programs usually have some sort of income threshold where if you pass that threshold, you suddenly completely lose benefits. And a lot of folks that are receiving these benefits are very cognizant of how that benefit cliff will impact them. And so oftentimes that might disincentivize, say, an individual from accepting a promotion or a raise. It might also keep a family that is a single income family from becoming a dual income family. And so one of the things we need to look at with public policy is making sure we're smoothing out a lot of these benefit cliffs. Child care assistance program is a perfect example of that. If there's benefit cliffs within that program, we can smooth those out, and that'll remove a disincentive to, advance your career, become a dual income household, whatever it might be. Unemployment insurance is another great place where we can look at where, again, that's a really important program. It needs to exist. It's an important thing. It's there for a reason, but we need to make sure that it's structured in a way to where it's not disincentivizing work. Kentucky, the average benefit duration for an unemployment claimant as of 2019 was about 18.2 weeks. That's the highest in the nation. It's the highest average benefit duration in the entire nation. Why is that? Those are things we need to think about. It's not the mere existence of UI, it's just how we structure that program. So, for example, our work search requirements I talked about earlier, we need to make those things better, make them stronger, more supportive, help folks get into reemployment situations. So that it intersects in a whole bunch of different ways, and it's certainly a driver of the problem we're pointing out here.
Representative Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently, I've received more than several phone calls from constituents in my district that's going to be losing their jobs due to their unwillingness to take the COVID vaccine. And it's the largest employer in my district is going to lose a significant number of its workforce. And my question is, how much has the mandated COVID vaccines by employers inflated the workforce in crisis? And I guess the follow-up to that is, can you extrapolate that? If you don't know the answer, can you extrapolate that answer from the research that you've currently done?
Sure. Great. It's a great question. It's a great topic that's getting a lot of discussion. So let me say a couple things. Looking at survey data, there's been some surveys that ask particularly unvaccinated workers, if your employer was to mandate a vaccine, what would you do? Would you quit? Would you not quit? And a lot of that initial survey data that came out suggested that a lot of unvaccinated workers might consider leaving the workforce if a vaccine was mandated. So, and that there was a variety of different ranges for how that would work. And one of the things that my initial reaction to that was that really underscores the importance of how difficult of a decision this often is for an employer and why government should stay out of that decision-making process. Second thing I would say, though, that's survey data. It's mixed use. I'm a big believer in surveys. I like polling data. But I think when it comes to surveying a question like that, that's a real hard question to get an accurate survey response to. People say all the time, if my employer does this, I'm going to leave. If I don't get a better parking place, I'm going to leave. And so, it's a hard question to answer. But we don't really need to think about survey data anymore because we have real world data that we can look at. And the fact of the matter is the percentage of individuals that actually end up leaving a job as a result of a vaccine mandate seems to be very, very low. Now, I'll use an example, the IU health system, Indiana University health system. Again, bearing in mind, if we were looking at, say, that survey data, that was suggesting anywhere 20 to 40% might leave. IU health system, about, I think it was less than 1% in terms of folks that seem to have left as a result of that. Again, that's a significantly smaller number. Instead, what a lot of these workplaces ended up seeing was increased vaccination rates. Again, though, it's a difficult decision for each individual employer to make, which is, again, one of those reasons why the chamber is adamant about leaving that decision-making capacity within the hands of employers. But in terms of the vaccine mandates at an individual employer level or the federal vaccine mandates that are coming down, I don't think that's having a large-scale impact on workforce participation.
All right, and we're going to go to Senator Southworth for the final question before we move on to cryptocurrency mining.
Oh, thank you. One of the things I was going to actually ask about the vaccine mandates as well, but I'm going to mention the FAFSA high school graduation requirement idea. I think that's going in the opposite direction because when we're talking about high-paying jobs, the only reason why our jobs need to pay as high as they do is because we're requiring certifications for them, which costs money and put people into debt. If they didn't go into debt, they wouldn't need as high a paying job because they wouldn't have those bills. So what I see as trying to get higher paying jobs and more, higher skilled and so forth, we need to always do that ROI of debt versus benefit ratio. And the first thing we could do is encourage our students to not go into debt. And so I would encourage you to consider that and maybe look at the data on how much out of debt students there are, how many are able to take a lower paying job because they don't have debt, and therefore it's smoothing out those fiscal cliffs like you mentioned, but kind of going in the other direction. The other thing I did want to ask, though, is really, you mentioned, and I understand the chambers may be lobbying on behalf of business, but when we're talking about workforce participation rates, it's down to the people that are the workforce, not necessarily the businesses. So if the people are being driven away from business, from engaging in the workforce in any direction, is the chamber interested in the workforce participation rates, the 1% or the 5% or whatever, are having vaccine firings or exemptions, or for whatever reason they're not going to be participating in the workforce anymore? Is the chamber interested in diverting them to a different segment of the workforce, or is the chamber interested in them not participating, or they don't care because it only matters if we make a large amount of difference versus a small amount relating to vaccine mandates?
Well, I'll start with your second question. Just because an individual, I wouldn't say those people are leaving the workforce. They're just switching jobs. So I guess I wouldn't see that much of an intersection in terms of the larger impact on the workforce, because they might leave one employer that's mandating it, but then go to another employer that's not mandating it. And I presume that's exactly what that individual would probably do. And I hope they can find another job as quickly as they can. So that's, again, why I think the overall impact on workforce participation is just, it's not going to be a significant number. Now, going back to your original question about FAFSA, again, one of the numbers I highlighted there was Pell Grant dollars, and those are not going to be federal loans, so there's no debt being taken on when you're getting those Pell Grant dollars. And that's another reason why we need to go after FAFSA. Those primarily target low-income individuals. We have a lot of low-income individuals in this state, so we're leaving a lot of money on the table that is not going to be high debt loads. The other thing I would encourage you to look at, though, is Council for Post-Secondary Education released a report, I think it was last month, highlighting the exact thing you're talking about, the ROI on these college degrees. as well as certifications in any form of post-secondary attainment, and they incorporate into that debt loads, student debt loads as well. And those folks that are getting those post-secondary attainments, they're still coming out on top. They're still doing really, really well, even when you factor in debt. So I think the evidence points very strongly towards the value of post-secondary attainment across the board.
Well, Mr. Ault, Ms. Miller, thank you so much for your time today. I know there was a couple other people that had questions, but we have to move along. We're already running a little bit behind schedule, so if you'd like to submit those questions to the committee in writing, we will make sure that those are delivered to the presenter so that they can receive answers. Okay, so next up, we have a presentation on cryptocurrency mining. Let's see, Bruce Wilcox, Michael Stolzner, and Jeremy Whitten. Very interesting topic. I had a friend of mine that talked about Bitcoin when it was $300. I thought it was crazy. I guess he was the one that was smart. So, but again, floor is yours. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Wheeler and members of the committee.
If you could turn your microphone on, you're not picking up here. There you go.
Are we on now? All right, perfect. Good morning, Mr. Wheeler and members of the committee. I'm Bruce Wilcox, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Greater Paducah Economic Development. On behalf of my organization and our community, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. And we certainly appreciate your interest in understanding the impact that data centers, data mining, and digital currency is having on our economies. Most of you are aware, and I think we all are, that we in Kentucky are very fortunate and we're very blessed to have some of the most affordable power rates in the country, even the world. We have a very sophisticated, we have a very reliable utility infrastructure, and in particularly in our far western portion of the state, we are right in the heart or the center of the MISO grid. The MISO grid is a network of electric providers that runs all the way from Canada all the way down to the Gulf. And there are a lot of transmission lines that intersect right in far western Kentucky. So that is one of the drivers of interest in putting cryptocurrency and large consumers of electricity in our area. We applaud you also for the recently enacted legislation that abated the sales and utility gross receipt tax on electric bills. Affordable power rates and the abatement of these taxes has driven a lot of interest in cryptocurrency mining because they are large consumers of electricity. We've seen electricity or crypto inquiries from the east coast of New York all the way across to California, up into Canada. I've talked to crypto interest in China, even into Greece. So about a year and a half ago, we developed a relationship with Jeremy Whitten to my right. Jeremy was with Navier at the time, which is a consultant that manages the construction of the crypto sites and then has an operating software that manages the back end once the center is operational. So there began our relationship with the crypto industry. Since then, over the past year, we've secured 2 different crypto projects, one of them being Blockware. We have Mike Stolzner here with us. He's the Chief Executive Officer with Blockware. Upon completion, there are a couple of phases to Blockware's project. The first phase is a 30-megawatt project. We certainly hope to be able to entice them to put an additional 30 megawatts there to get them up to the 60-megawatt project that we're looking to secure. That will end up being about a $50 million project, and we believe it will ultimately result in hiring 20 full-time employees. We also have another unannounced project of another crypto project that is in our community that has multiple locations, and when it's all said and done, it will be about a 15-megawatt consumer of electricity, about a $15 million capital investment, and about 5 employees. We've had a lot of significant interest from other crypto companies ranging anywhere from 10 to 100 megawatts. And there continues to be a lot of interest coming from China and from private equity monies. Most all of you are aware that China has outlawed or doesn't allow cryptocurrency, Bitcoin mining in China. So all of the miners there, they're looking for a home. They're looking for somewhere to place their machines immediately. And then we're all aware of how private equity works. Private equity's interested in getting an immediate return on their investment. So therein lies the interest of placing these machines as quickly as possible. So that process, it involves a matching process. We have to identify existing locations or existing pockets of underutilized power where there's excess megawatt capacity around substations, and then we have to acquire land that's in close proximity to these substations. That's what we were able to do with Blockware. We have an industrial development park called Industrial Park West. It's right off I-24. We were able to work out an arrangement with Blockware Mining, with Big Rivers Electric through Jackson Purchase Energy, being intricately involved, to where Big Rivers Electric is investing almost $13 million in utility infrastructure upgrades to Industrial Park West to increase the megawatt capacity to 100 megawatts. This has also led into additional opportunities for Paducah Power. Big Rivers infrastructure investment is going to take 18 to 24 months, so that's led into some other opportunities with Paducah Power as well. So when you sit back and ask why is cryptocurrency or data mining, digital currency, why is it good for our community? It's good for the consumer and the power companies. Number one, I think it's prudent for us to realize that I can speak for Big Rivers Electric and Paducah Power. Our utility companies are solid. They're funded well. All of these crypto deals that they are doing, they're collateralized. In all instances, they're having to put up 2 to 3 months worth of deposits for electric bills. Crypto's an unregulated currency, so you can't go out and get a letter of credit, right? So they're actually having to put up cash. So most all of these deals are cash collateralized from the exposure that could be from the electric bills for 2 to 3 months, as well as the infrastructure that's being built to accommodate that. So as the power companies are able to sell more megawatts, that enables them to produce more electricity, and it allows them to spread those costs out over more megawatts. In theory, just like in business, you have fixed costs to operate your business. It costs $100 to operate your business, whether you have one customer or 100. So as you're able to bring more customers on board, it reduces your fixed cost per customer. So over time, what we believe that we will see as these power companies embrace and engage with more crypto companies, we'll see the fixed cost charge per customer actually decline. It will also generate additional cash flow for future investment into our utility infrastructure, and it will enable our power companies to service and manage their debt appropriately. So we're excited about having Blockware in our community. We anticipate the recurring annual economic benefit for our community to be around $3 million a year from these guys. They've been a wonderful partner with us. And I'll turn things over to Mike now. Mike's the CEO of Blockware, and he can share a little bit more with you.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler and committee, for inviting me to speak.
I think your microphone there.
I think it, am I on here? You got me now? Okay, I need to lean forward. I had back surgery a couple of weeks ago, so I have a tendency to lean back. But thank you for inviting me to speak before you and tell you a little bit about Blockware. I had put together, my team had put together this little handout, which I thought would be helpful to whomever would be interested in looking through it. It's kind of a little bit of Bitcoin mining 101. So a good review. But as far as I think what this committee would like to hear is really how the economic development and the workforce investment that we're putting into the community. So I'd like to cover that and give you a very brief background. About a year and a half ago, we began our search for a location to build our first mining facility. A mining facility is essentially a data center. It's a structure that's housed with thousands of servers. So we started looking about that. We went through Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, numerous states. We then were introduced to Bruce and GPED, and they kind of held our hands and took us through the process of showing us some sites around Kentucky and greater Paducah area, and introduced us to the proper people to start the process of applying for a KBI, which we did do that, and we were granted back in January. And also with Big River, we signed a PPI with them back last April for a 10-year purchase. Our first phase, which is a 30 megawatt facility, for the servers that will fill that, which are approximately 9,900 servers, and the build out of the building at current cost is about $100 million investment for that first phase. The second phase, per the agreement with Big River, will begin in June of 2023. So actually, Senator Wheeler, hitting on a point that you had questioned, I believe the gentleman that spoke last. Bitcoin mining and what we do is actually bringing industry back to the Midwest, back to areas of the country that had lost the steel mills and the industry of the early 1900s or the 1900s. A lot of the facilities that are being used for mining facilities are old mills that have been shut down, from Kentucky to the East Chicago and so forth. So we've always gone by a slogan that we're bringing hash rate to the United States. China, a year ago, China controlled 65% of the hash rate in the world. The United States was 7%. Today, the United States is 19% and growing. So we feel that we are bringing industry back to the United States. Now to kind of concentrate on the workforce investment. We currently, we started our project, we broke ground on our project in, what was it, maybe July? July we broke ground. We're just be pouring the slab for the building. The building has been delivered. It will begin to be erected next month. We hope to begin to load our first mining rigs, our first couple megawatts in the structure by the end of November. We have already started a hiring process where we currently have 4 full-time employees, all Paducah residents. We have 2 others starting the 1st of next month. We have 2 others that are reviewing contracts that are high-level jobs. In this case, and the people I laid out, 2 of them are they don't have college education or a community college education, but the jobs that we're paying them are $18 an hour to start with full medical benefits. On the pardon me? Oh, okay. And then on the higher end of that, we have numerous jobs that are the techs that are in the 70,000 plus area of income with full benefits. And you'll see by going through the handout I have that Kentucky currently is the second largest Bitcoin mining state in the country, with Texas making a major move. So I think that sums up most of what I wanted to say on what we're doing in Kentucky and the bright future that we see for our business in Kentucky. And we are currently, and Jeremy will hit on a couple of things that we're working on, a handful of other projects within the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Co-Chair Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank our guests for their attendance and testimonials today. I apologize that I can't be there in person. Part of the reason I really wanted this on the agenda is we've heard how Kentucky nationally has gained a good reputation for mining companies, but it seems like when I talk to people in economic development across the state and different utility companies, there's still a bit of skepticism with the industry. So I appreciate hearing from our witnesses, and hopefully we can continue to show people how beneficial these companies can be for the Commonwealth. I have a question for Bruce and then to Michael and Jeremy, but first to Bruce, what can we do for your counterparts across the state maybe to help them see the value that you've been able to see in the Paducah area?
Sure. When I look at any economic deal, I've spent almost 30 years in private industry. I'm a CPA by trade, and I've been the CFO and then the president of 2 different companies. So I always look at an economic deal of managing risk, and from both sides, from the economic development side and the company side. And when I look at these deals, I go back again, these deals are cash collateralized. So from a risk perspective, there's very little risk from the utility company's side of things. We've seen a push towards green energy, particularly with solar. We all know that the battery storage and the battery capacity for solar, it's not there. But if we keep moving that direction, that's going to disincentivize fossil fuel facilities and power plants that produce electricity with fossil fuels. So the thing about this is this increases the base load for power plants. It gets it up to X. And one of the good things about most every crypto company that I've talked to, when you do a power purchase agreement, you can do interruptible power agreement or a non-interruptible power agreement. Most all of them will choose the interruptible power rate because it's less expensive. So if you get into a situation where you have, take Big Rivers for instance, long term, I think their goal is to have a third coal, a third gas, and a third green energy. So if we enter into a position to where the solar, it's raining or it's dark or whatever, or a hot heat summer, very cold streak like we had down in Texas this past year, the power company can go back to the cryptos company and say, we need to idle your machine down. They can idle these machines down in a matter of minutes and reduce their consumption. So back to the power company, you have a base load of X. You can power the crypto companies down, but then you can power it back up to what the consumers has. So we've seen it a win-win situation from both sides.
If I could add one point on that. Energy can't be stored. Yeah, it's not like oil. You can put it in a tank and save it and use it tomorrow, next week, next year. It's gone. So what crypto miners do is actually bring down the cost and exposure to the utility companies because we even them out. When they have excess load, we're taking it. When they need load in a hot summer day, we're pulling back. So we even their load. And one other thing to go with that, when you will hear the argument, well, crypto mining, Bitcoin mining, wastes energy. Bitcoin mining worldwide uses 1/10 of 1% of the disposable energy. The same amount of energy that's used to run a cruise line runs the entire Bitcoin network. So there's some fallacies around energy use.
Senator Mills.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. A couple of questions here. I'm struggling the last 6 or 7 months. My son is actually mining helium, if you know what that is. He's really big into learning about blockchain technology and is invested in some others, and he keeps on trying to drag me along, and I keep on asking for an explanation. So your primer is going to be really good. On the way home, I can read this. But just a couple of things. How often does your company recognize your profits in U.S. dollars? That's one of the questions about, the profitability of mining companies keeping their profits in Bitcoin, and when do they realize their profits? So how do you do that?
It is obviously all a corporate strategy, and different people have different strategies. I will tell you from our beginning, and we began in 2019, we went to U.S. dollars. Typically, if it were not daily, within every 3 days, because we used the income that we earned from mining to buy more miners, to build up. For instance, the facility that we're building in Paducah, we are 100% out of pocket. We went to every single bank in the greater Paducah area to get financing, even to build the building, and we couldn't get financing. So we have rolled back our mining rewards into that. Now we do, as we've grown, we carry a small treasury of Bitcoin. In time, we will carry a larger treasury of Bitcoin, but it's, be it an individual that's trading for their own account or be it a business, it's a board type decision, on how you want to allocate that.
Okay, and a couple of questions here. So the legislation we passed last year, I can't remember what the height of the investment or the dollar amount was, but it's basically targeted to larger mining companies. I've had a couple of people reach out to me, and you may know who they are in the Paducah area, that have some smaller mining interests. I believe it's Community Ventures has some smaller mining interests that are interested in the abatement of the sales tax. Do you see that as a positive economic development tool if we were to abate that to smaller organizations that are just starting out with, say, 50 to 100 machines?
I think it's been one of the things that's put us on the map worldwide. So I would add, when you look at your electric bill, there's a 6% sales tax on the electrical consumption, and then there's a 3% utility gross receipts tax. So it also abated that as well. So it's not uncommon for one of these larger companies to have a power bill of $500,000 a month or greater. So
greater.
You do the math. 9% adds up pretty quickly. So I think those same economics, certainly to scale, would benefit a smaller miner as well.
And then what we do, we accommodate the smaller miners, where, say, in our facility that's 30 megawatts. That's not all 30 megawatts that's mining for our own account and our own business. We may have someone like your son that has 5 or 10 miners that he wants to host with us. And he has it in a secure environment with 24/7 security and monitoring, and he pays a fee for electric. And it's really quite interesting process. You put your servers in there, you have what's called a wallet, and your mining rewards each day get deposited in that wallet, and you see them daily. But so we provide that service to smaller miners.
Interesting. And then my final question is, all the miners that were in China that were shut down, and are they actually moving the equipment to the U.S., or are they just purchasing new equipment?
They've moved a lot of equipment here. Not as much to the U.S. A lot of the Chinese equipment has been moved to other parts of Asia and to Eastern Europe. To a large degree, the Chinese miners that are coming here are buying new equipment.
Okay. Very good. Bitcoin's at the highest it's ever been, right?
Yeah,
now,
yes,
right?
yesterday
65,000.
traded 67,000 yesterday, which
Yeah.
the prior high was I want to say 64,750.
Thank y'all for your testimony.
Thank you.
Banta.
Yes, and please forgive my night. I'm kind of naive about this, but I find it interesting. I know Hawaii kind of shut it down. I know you haven't have you don't have the federal regulations yet. What keeps me from being a huge cartel drug dealer and laundering all my money through Bitcoin?
Well, I don't see that laundering money through Bitcoin or any other process. If you look at the facts, there are far more money laundered through banks, foreign banks, than there are through the Bitcoin network. So I just don't see that as an easy means of laundering money. Jeremy, maybe you can address that more. He's the engineer in the group.
So what's interesting is when you think Bitcoin, you think the wallet, you think everything's anonymous, whereas the wallet is actually pseudo-anonymous. So you can actually track it's a public ledger, so you can actually see the transactions where they go by just accessing publicly, whereas any other process you'd have to access for those documents, you have to apply, you have to talk with the banks in other countries, whereas the wallet, if you from the standpoint of following, if you do suspect where there's something going on, you can track where that wallet, where it's being either paid or distributed to from there. So from a network point of view, it's actually more transparent than current systems from that aspect.
And once recorded, it's there forever. So once the block, which in the term blockchain, every transaction is verified by a block. So it's in the history forever. So you could go into, if you're talking about Ethereum, which is another second largest token, you could go into Ethereum Ledger and you can pull up and see the activity that I could see the activity that Jeremy has done. Every transaction has to pass through that ledger.
But do we care? Is anybody looking at that?
There's people that study it pretty hard to figure out, and the reason they study it pretty hard is because they want to know when everyone knows who's the biggest holders of, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, and they watch to see when they're buying or they're selling. Because if they're selling and they're the largest holder, conventional wisdom says the market's probably going into a down cycle. So yes, people do follow it quite closely.
Okay, and we have Representative Lockett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to say thank you for your presentation. My dad actually retired from Paducah Power, and so it's certainly a pleasure to see that they are working with you as well. My question is my other job is I work as a financial advisor, and there is not one major company to my knowledge that will sell their clients Bitcoin. I can't. It's absolutely forbidden in the company that I work for. As you probably know, Bitcoin is considered very speculative. And so therefore, there is not a company that will will sell it to their clients because of that reason. So my question is what would you say to that, first of all, and second of all, what would you give to a company in terms of a reassurance that yes, this is something that you should or could offer to your clients?
If I'm not mistaken, within the last 30 to 60 days, Goldman Sachs, Chase, Morgan Stanley have all now offered Bitcoin to their clients. And the first ETF started trading Tuesday on Bitcoin, which is an SEC approved product.
So how would you, like if you were making a presentation to say Edward Jones,
yeah,
how would you describe to them, and therefore in terms of individuals, how would you tell them or describe to them the process that they could have assurance, and I guess us here too as well, have assurance that Bitcoin is something that, one, is going to be around for a long time, but two, is something that is backed up by something that can hold it stable?
I think that what it has been proven, and there's two uses of, be it Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin specifically, you hear the term digital gold. So Bitcoin in a lot of ways is taking the place of gold as an inflation hedge. And I know within our company, when we did a capital raise, we have a number of large investors that are older people that were, as you refer to, gold bugs. You know, they've been gold investors their whole life. And they have made the move into Bitcoin as their digital gold. So Bitcoin has two uses: the digital gold, which is the inflation hedge, the buy and hold. You also, all the different projects that are being done, and in time, just like the internet in 1994, you know, was new to all of us. The internet as we know it today won't exist in a handful of years, in 5 to 10 years. The whole internet will be based upon a decentralized platform, which will be done upon blockchain. I'm not saying it's going to be done on Bitcoin or Ether. I don't know where it will be, but it will be based upon a blockchain. So, you have anything to add to that, Jeremy?
All I can add is really from just more of a personal story, because a lot of when I was introduced to Bitcoin, 4 or 5 years ago, I went through the same process, learning that where you all are asking now, and coming out of main primary industry and the alloy industry, I would have never dreamed being introduced to Bitcoin and the process that it does. But through learning and seeing the application, seeing how the industry has evolved, and how it has a mutual benefit to the utility industry, the power industry, the value that's where I see the value, and as the future progresses, the value will continue to increase based on the use, not just the existing use cases, but the future use cases, and where, because from the standpoint of when I look at the value, and I look at Kentucky, I'm born and raised here. Kentucky is centrally located, in the hub of all the industry, both with the 65 corridor, 75, and 24. Over the years we've lost a lot of heavy industry that has a lot of jobs that comes with it, but we also have an opportunity to harness this industry and establish basically a technology hub for this industry, because Kentucky, and people don't know, Kentucky has access to 3 different independent system operators. So MISO, PJM, and in the Southeast, like TVA. There's not another state that has 3. So from a diversity, Kentucky offers very diverse opportunities to go around the state and benefit both large and small communities. So the value, and back to the investment part, that I see that every investment that you have always comes with a risk. It's how can you understand, because most of the time when people go to a typical investor, do you really know what you trust what they put in front of you, and you look at the history. This is how it's performed. So we trust that. And so you want to do the same thing when you look at Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. There's a history to go off of, and you want to look at that. But you also want to understand how the industry works, just like the typical stocks. How does the company work? What are they providing? What's the problem that they're solving? And in the case of the application of Bitcoin and mining from the standpoint of it creates value by what you're creating new Bitcoin, and also verifying the network, and you're getting block rewards based on the transactions that are approved and verified.
One quick thing to add on a personal basis, because I'm older than most of the miners out there, so I got introduced to it late in life. But I spent 34 years being the managing partner of one of the largest proprietary trading companies in the world, which is a very highly regulated business. We had to file a focus report with the SEC every morning by 9 o'clock, same with the NESD and so forth. So I come from a very regulated background. And one of the things that we have done with Blockware mining since day one is try to bring that thought process, those practices to our business. We look forward to the regulation of the industry. The regulation of the industry will only help us, not hurt us. There have been many bad actors through the years, just like there's bad actors in many things, and many things that are new and pop up, be it on the internet, whatever. But so we embrace, the change in regulations that are coming.
Thank you.
We have a final follow-up question from Co-Chair Schroeder. Co-Chair Schroeder, are you still out there? Okay, maybe not. Well, gentlemen, thank you for...
Can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Oh, we got you. Okay, sure.
I think I was muted. Sorry about that. My comment and question to Michael and Jeremy. First of all, thank you for investing in Kentucky. Michael, you had mentioned Texas, and that seems consistent with all the news out there. It seems like Kentucky's second to Texas, and I was wondering, in your experience of choosing Kentucky, if there's anything that we could do that would make it even more attractive for other companies.
If everything we did, and again, thanks to Bruce Wilcox and GPED that really held our hand and took it through the land purchase, the KBI process, everything. The hardest process we found was dealing with the utility companies and coming to an understanding with them, and then the final review of going before, what was the
PSC.
Public Service.
Yeah, before going before the Public Service Committee. So it was a lengthy process. if it were possible to shorten that process, it would be of help.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, I think that concludes our presentation for today. The next meeting of this committee will be held on November 18th at 9:00 a.m. We don't have a room yet, so just watch for your schedules when they're issued. So thank you very much for your attendance today.